Welcome to the Locked On Titans podcast. I am your host, Tyler Rowland. Titans fans, it's crossover Thursday, and we have Gino Cammilleri from the Locked On Eagles podcast on the show to preview this big game. First, can the Tennessee Titans get their identity back against the Eagles? Then, can the Titans shut down A.J. Brown? Finally, Gino and I will make our game and score predictions for this game. All of that and more on a crossover Thursday edition of the Locked On Titans podcast. Let's get it.
You are Locked On Titans, your daily Tennessee Titans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome on in, everybody, to another Thursday edition of the show. It is crossover Thursday here between Locked On Eagles and Locked On Titans. I'm your host, Gino Cammilleri, joined by Tyler Rowland, and this episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, as always, here on Thursday. PrizePicks is daily fantasy made easy. Pick 2 to 5 players, and if they score more or less than their PrizePicks projection, you can win up to 10x your money. First-time users get a 100% deposit match. You put in 100, you will get 100 back by using the promo code Locked On. That's LOCKEDON. Tyler, this match we only see once every 4 years. We were talking about it before the show started. The last one was a miserable outing for the Philadelphia Eagles in a game I think many of us have scarred on our conscience for quite some time. The walk-off victory for the Titans in overtime, the big fourth down pickup. We're many years removed from that. What is going on in the AFC South? How are the Titans looking? I know it's been a rock and roll season, a rock and roll last couple seasons up and down. How is it looking so far for the Titans? Fill our listeners in here at Locked On Eagles.
Well, I mean, it's a mixed bag. You know, the Titans are a good football team with a lot of good players, with good coaching. They often have a pretty good plan for things as well. So you see the 7-4 record. I do think the Titans are a good team, but what we found throughout the season is the Titans may not be a great team because they haven't been able to really beat any quality opponents. Their only win this year against a team with a winning record is the Washington Commanders, which I know that they're 7-5 now, or, you know, have a winning record now, but, you know, how much do we really believe in the Commanders as a really good football team? They may be okay, but the question still remains, are the Titans able to beat a quality opponent at any time, or is this just a well-coached, really solid Titans team that doesn't really have what it takes to compete with the elite teams in the league? That's kind of the question right now. Coming off that loss against Cincinnati, I think if you asked your average Titans fan that question, can the Titans compete with the elite teams in the NFL this year? I think they'd probably tell you no, based on what we've seen, the blowout to Buffalo. I know the Titans were playing with Malik Willis, but they still weren't able to get over the hump against Kansas City. And then the loss to the Bengals, where, quite frankly, the Bengals took the Titans' lunch money. They beat them at their own game. They beat them up physically at the line of scrimmage. And, it's kind of depressing when you look at it from the Titans' perspective, knowing that Cincinnati could come into Tennessee and treat them that way and kind of beat them at their own game, give them a taste of their own medicine. So I think right now, you see the really good. Obviously, the Titans have been able to run the ball throughout the year, even though they've struggled lately. As they've gotten healthy with their passing attack weapons, like Treylon Burks has come back. The Titans have gotten better in the passing game there. Clearly, they have a very good defense, starting with the defensive line, but there's some injuries on that defensive line. There's some questionable play at cornerback and just their ability to win one-on-one. So while this Titans team has some obvious strengths, there are also some obvious weaknesses. And when it comes to playing against great teams in the NFL, which clearly the Eagles are, I think it's only fair to question whether the Titans have what it takes to compete with teams on that level.
Well, first off, I want to say thank you for recognizing the Philadelphia Eagles as being that team, because I still don't think that they're getting that credit. They're
word on the street is the Eagles are mid.
Yeah, they had. Yeah, according to our friends over at Locked On Bengals, yes, absolutely. And this is one of those. This is one of those games that Lou and I had circled before the season, because if you look at this Eagles schedule, front loaded with some teams that were they're average. They're not really those teams that you're saying they're going to be there in the playoffs. And then you get into this stretch where you're facing Green Bay last week. You're facing Tennessee this week. You're going to get two games against the Giants, one against Dallas. This was the stretch where you're saying, if you want to play good physical football in late months, December, January, February, these are the type of games that are going to help you write that resume and get you to that next level. Like you had said with Tennessee, the reason why they've been around and have been in playoff games is because nobody wants to tackle Derrick Henry for 30 times a game, right? It's like Jason Kelce has said, who wants to be the toughest? Yeah, that's one thing. But if you want to be the toughest, the longest, that will inevitably put you over the hump. And that's the thing with the Eagles right now. They have found ways in adversity-stricken matches to where they have been toughest the longest. That Green Bay game, it wasn't easy. You had a bunch of points being scored. You had to outshoot them in the offensive game, where last week, the week before, you played Indy, who you know very well in that division. They played tough, sound, fundamental football, and you're in a defensive shootout, and then all of a sudden your quarterback has to put it together. But you have now learned how to win a multitude of different games in a multitude of different ways. The thing that Lou and I have been preaching is the consistency, especially against these teams, which you're going to see have better talent, are made for these winning months, because you just played Green Bay, A.J. Dillon, they have Aaron Jones, you played Jonathan Taylor, you played Derrick Henry, 2 times of Saquon, you're going to see Zeke Elliott again. All of these teams are built in a similar philosophy to how the Eagles are. So really what it's going to come down to is who plays better fundamental football. I love that point that you mentioned against Cincinnati, where you got beat up in the trenches. Football is a funny thing. People think it's so complicated, but when it boils down to it, it's, are our guys tougher than your guys?
Yep.
Can
one grown man against another.
Exactly. Can you get push on the offensive line? When it's a 50-50 ball, is your corner in a position to make that play? And that's ultimately what this comes down to. And I love that we are full circle from 2018, where that Eagles team, they didn't have that mentality. They had that, we'll let you back in. We don't know how to finish games. That's an identity that you built. And getting to 10-1, people might not want to put respect on them, but how they have done it in a multitude of different ways, throwing the ball, running the ball, defensively, that's an identity that can take you far into the playoffs. We've seen Tennessee do that exact thing when Tannehill over the past couple of years, they get that ground game going, they get the play action game going. How many teams can defend that for 60 minutes for multiple times in a game? I don't know. And that's what it comes down to in the National Football League. Who is the toughest, the longest? Who has the grown men to go out there and win? And this is one of those tests that we said, you guys got horses. We got horses. Like you mentioned, Treylon Burks is starting to figure it out. The defensive line is something that I am just always scared about. Jeffrey Simmons is an absolute game wrecker. Kevin Byard on the back end is one of the most underrated safeties in football. And we'll talk about all of those matchups and everything. But I just want to say for both of our teams right now, Ty, this identity that both of us are trying to get into our head, that Vrabel-esque identity. It's very similar to what Sirianni preaches. I think they're cut from a very similar cloth. I think they preach a very similar message, and it's just about the execution of it all. Did you get the buy-in? How long did it take your team to buy in? And I think you're finally starting to get that with Tennessee. You can tell me that I'm wrong on that end, but I think both of these teams are very similar in their identity.
No, I think they both have fantastic coaches that, again, inspire the players. They work with them fundamentally speaking on technique. So you're getting that, football knowledge, but you also get like the compassion of man. You know what I mean? Where you feel like your coach cares and you're willing to go play your hardest and do things that other players wouldn't do for other coaches because of that. And then again, playmakers on the outside, they want to be stout up front on the defensive lines. They want to run the ball, play action, all that. Now they do it in different ways. And that's why football's so great. They have the similar philosophy, but they do it in different ways schematically, both on offense and defense. But I'm sure we will get into that more as we dive into the matchup portion of today's show. But before we do that, I got a feeling, Gino, you're going to tell us who today's show is sponsored by.
Oh, of course. This episode of Locked On Eagles and Locked On Titans is brought to you by our friends over at Audible. I love that we just continue to get these well-known brands, these well-known names. Audible is one of the big ones. Audible is now releasing a new slate of football podcasts, and you're going to love them. You're obviously listening to us here because you love football. Well, go check them out. They have a new show coming out. It's called Block Forever by Ryan Khalil. Ryan Khalil, you know who he is. He's a longtime NFL player, and he will bring you all of the insight. He will be talking to you Thursdays before Thursday Night Football. You can hear Russell Wilson along with co-hosts Harry Wilson and Trevor Moet. They dig into high-performance athletes, artists, and leaders, push the boundaries to all their potential. Hear two-time Super Bowl champion Von Miller with sharp insights about performing at your highest level. Each episode features interviews with Olympic medalists, NFL stars, and business leaders. You could find Block Forever and now Think Like a Champion wherever you get your shows. It's on Audible. Head over to the Locked On Presents for a sneak peek of Think Like a Champion, or catch the full series available anywhere where you get your podcasts, available everywhere now. Audible, get in the game. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in to this edition of the Locked On Eagles and Locked On Titans NFL crossover. One of the coolest things we do here at the Locked On NFL podcast. I'm Gino Cammilleri, Tyler Rowland from Locked On Titans. Segment 1, we talked about just where we are. We wrote the story. We got where we are in terms of standings, how we have gotten here with coaching, players. Now it's about the matchup, the X's and the O's. And I think we have to jump right to the big one, Ty. The dramatics that went down back in April. There's a great clip of me, a great screenshot of my jaw absolutely dropping when this happened. A.J. Brown traded from Tennessee to Philadelphia. The Tennessee Titans go out and draft a replacement in Treylon Burks. We're now seeing the tale of two stories. The Eagles go out and get a bona fide player to bring in and surround their young quarterback with. And you have Ryan Tannehill, who it seems like it's going in the opposite direction. He had the guys on the outside, and now Treylon Burks, he's starting to pick it up. How have things looked outside of having A.J. Brown? I know it was off to a little rocky start, but things seem to be turning around there.
Well, first and foremost, Treylon Burks isn't A.J. Brown. Right now, if you look at him, we got to be fair about that. But something I talked about on my show earlier this week was it looks like the trade does have a chance to be a win-win, similar to the Justin Jefferson, Stephon Diggs trade. Now, I'm not saying that Treylon Burks is the quality of Justin Jefferson, because that isn't the case. But it's not a simple one-for-one scenario here, because the trade that the Titans made with the Eagles allowed them to do some draft maneuvering and pick up multiple picks within the top 100. Starting right tackle, NPF, Nicholas Petit-Frere, has been the Titans starter all year long. He was only available, and the Titans were only able to acquire him because of the domino effect that happened from the trade with A.J. Brown. Similarly, Titans starting cornerback Roger McCreary, who has been a rookie. He's taken his lumps, had his ups and downs, but he's been a top 5 rookie cornerback in the NFL this year per Pro Football Focus. So, you look at it, and even the 5th round pick, you could say, is a result of the Titans trading A.J. Brown. So it's really like a 3-1, 4-1 scenario where the Eagles got their guy, perfect plug-in, what they needed. They're 9-1, 10-1. Could be on their way to Super Bowl win for the Eagles, but the Titans got cheaper, they got younger, and they filled multiple positions, which I think clearly they desperately needed when you look at the cornerback group and the offensive line group. So I think this has a chance to be a win-win long-term, even if it seems like a slam dunk win and a loss for the Eagles and the Titans respectively right now. But I want to use that as a segue into my matchup, and it's the Titans cornerbacks against the wide receiver group of the Philadelphia Eagles. The Titans have won the chess match on defense multiple times this year. Schematically, they run the correct coverage. They have the right stunt on. They do everything right. But like we talked about early in the first segment and set the stage, winning one-on-one matchups against the other grown man across from you is what this league comes down to sometimes. The Titans will win the chess match from an X's and O's standpoint. But as we saw last week against the Bengals with T. Higgins going for 7 for 114 and a touchdown, Sometimes you just throw the ball up on the sideline and the wide receiver makes a play over the Titans cornerback in one-on-one coverage. We saw it with Mac Hollins with a career-high game of 158 yards in week 3. We saw it Alec Pierce from the Colts. We saw Daimi Brown from the Commanders win that matchup on the sideline against the Titans cornerback. The cornerbacks may change. Maybe our worst corners, our best corners in Christian Fulton and Roger McCreary, but it doesn't seem to matter every week if the other team has a great wide receiver or a couple of big physical wide receivers that can make plays. They seem to just win one-on-one against the Titans corners, even if the Titans play good defense. Well, A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, even Quez Watkins lately has been playing some good ball. Picked him up on my fantasy team this morning. Just have to throw that in there. But, the Titans can do everything right on a play and still lose because they just seem to lose one-on-one battles on the outside. It would be a great opportunity for A.J. Brown to remind the Titans exactly what they gave up and what he can do. And I am a bit worried about that. I've been worried about it against the Packers. Watson and Lazard made big plays. I worried about it against the Bengals. Higgins dominated and basically won the game. And I'm worried about it right now with the Eagles. And that's the number one matchup I'm looking for. Can the Titans cornerbacks win a couple battles in one-on-one contested catch situations against the Eagles' awesome wide receivers?
And that's a great way to set it up because after last week where the Eagles were so run heavy, they run for, a century
over 300 yards, right?
363 yards on the ground. Whoa. And now you have to respond and go to a game where you are probably going to have to pass more. And I'm so glad you brought that up because Lou and I have been talking. Without Dallas Goedert, that middle of the field hasn't been utilized. It's been the boundary. So it's going to come down to, can A.J. Brown in a revenge game, can Devonta Smith, can Quez Watkins, these guys win their one-on-one matchups? Because my biggest fear is what Tennessee can do on the interior of the defensive line and cause all of that havoc, blow up your offensive line with Jeffrey Simmons, who is – we thought he could have been the replacement to Fletcher Cox a few years ago. We wanted him so badly at Locked On Eagles, and he truly is coming to his own. So the biggest matchup right now for me is winning the pocket battle. Can the Eagles keep it clean for Jalen Hurts? We know when things go awry that he can create outside of the pocket, and guys can lay some licks on him, man. He's got to figure out how to get down. He can't get hit that often. So in this game, I'm hoping that he can stand in the pocket and trust his playmakers. Because as you said, you're going to go against guys in Roger McCreary and really
Christian Fulton. Yeah.
Christian Fulton. These two guys.
Or Trey Avery, who's an undrafted free agent who got a bunch of snaps this week.
That's what I'm saying. I don't want to downplay who they are, but I look back to that Pittsburgh matchup a few weeks ago where A.J. Brown dominated and they were willing to throw against Minkah Fitzpatrick with a too high safety look. Yeah. I think about the same thing with Byard. Even with Byard on the back end, I still trust A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith and Quez Watkins to win those one-on-one matchups. Turning to Tennessee's offense, I think the biggest question mark, everybody knows it's coming. How long can the Philadelphia Eagles defend Derrick Henry in that interior? And my question to you is, how much do you trust the interior of the Titans offensive line to create that push against the Philadelphia Eagles defense?
This is great, man, because the number one thing that I've been looking at on tape is the Eagles running their 6-1 front and teams running 6-1 fronts against the Titans. The Packers did it incredibly successfully in 2020 on a Thursday night football game in Lambeau or a Sunday night football game in Lambeau. And then since then, we've seen teams do it. But these last few weeks playing the Packers again, the Bengals last week, who also did it back in the playoffs against the Titans, and now the Eagles who have shown that front. What happens is the Titans run a zone run scheme. So they're outside zone. Well, when you run a 6-1 front, you put 4 defensive linemen within the tackle box. So you're eliminating the ability of the Titans' interior offensive line to create double teams and then slide up to the second level on a linebacker. Basically, everybody's going to have to go one-on-one. And the Titans don't have, with an undersized center and Aaron Brewer, who's even smaller than Jason Kelsey, with a guy like Dennis Daly at left tackle, with Dylan Radins at left guard, who's a much better pass blocker than run blocker. They just don't have the guys up front that can win one-on-one matchups as forced to do it. Now, one great counter to the 6-1 front is power runs. The Titans like zone runs, but they have mixed in some power runs where you have a backside puller coming across. You kind of wash down some guys. Well, the issue with that is you still got to win one-on-one down blocks. And is Aaron Brewer, a 270-pound, 6'1" center, going to win a down block on Jordan Davis, who's probably returning for this game? No,
they got Sue and Linval Joseph and Javon Hargrave and Fletcher.
And they got smoked last week by DJ Reader and BJ Hill and Trey Hendrickson and Sam Hubbard. And right now, the Titans don't have the personnel, nor do they have the game plan from the coaching staff to be able to combat the 6-1 front and do anything about it. They don't threaten you with the passing game enough to get people out of playing single high. Now, it'll be interesting because I know that the Eagles like to play a lot of 2 high. They like to play zone. Teams like to play single high and play man against the Titans regardless, like Denver, another team who's kind of cut from the same cloth defensively in terms of philosophy. Denver said, screw what we do. We're playing tight man coverage with single high safeties because you can't beat it. And I think despite the fact the Eagles like to play 2 high zone, I think they're going to adjust their coverage and do what's beaten the Titans consistently over and over again. And watching what the Eagles decide to do, I think that's like the number one. It's not players, but it's a coaching matchup thing that I'm very interested to see take place.
Well, just one last point on that. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson won't be playing due to a lacerated kidney injury. They're going to bring in undrafted free agent Reed Blankenship. Do they trust him a lot more to just be down in the box and put Marcus Epps in single high, like you said? That will be one of those chess pieces that we will see. This is going to be a fun matchup. We talked about the X's and O's. There's only one thing left to do, Ty. We are going to talk about the predictions. I hate score predictions, but I like seeing how the game might turn out. So we'll get into that right after a message that Tyler will bring you from our friends over at BetOnline.
Absolutely. We're going to make our predictions on this game, but I'm sure you guys have your predictions in your mind of how this game is going to work out. If you want to put your money where your mouth is, make sure you go to betonline.net, the number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. You can get all the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from football to basketball to soccer and esports. They've got it all at betonline.net. The fastest and easiest way to get your betting fix. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, guys, we are going to dive into the matchup or the prediction. I love the matchup talk so much. I'm just so deep into the film, and I love what the Eagles are doing schematically. But the show must go on, and it's time to give our predictions on what will happen here. Before we do want to thank you guys for making Locked On Titans and Locked On Eagles your first listen every day. As for your second listen, check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast. All the biggest stories, all the biggest game recaps from local insiders, all the biggest news in every sport, not just football. So make sure to check out Locked On Sports Today on YouTube, on Audible, whatever podcast you do follow or use. But in the prediction segment, man, I got to tell you, Titans fans always get pretty mad at me because I'm not someone who comes on here and picks the Titans to win every single game. I do want to say so far this year, though, Titans have played 11 games, and I'm 8-3 on my predictions. So I feel like I have a pretty good bead on other teams and how the Titans will do against them. What it comes down to for me is stuff that we've hinted on before. I think the things that really break the Titans back as a defense is outside wide receiver matchups. And Philly, A.J. Brown. I mean, we can talk about the Titans connection all we want, but the reality is whether he used to play for the Titans or not, it's still going to be a problem on Sunday because it hits at the Titans' biggest weakness on defense. Also, the Titans' biggest strength, so the biggest weakness is exploitable. The Titans' biggest strength on defense is that defensive line. But here's the reality. Titans aren't going to have Danico Autry. He's probably the most underrated pass rusher in the NFL. Quite frankly, I think Brandon Thorne from The Athletic just put him number 2 on his underrated pass rusher list in the NFL. Danico Autry's not going to play in this game because of a knee injury. And without Danico Autry, the only really impactful rusher that you have is Jeffrey Simmons. Now, some Titans fans will hear that and say, well, what about Bud Dupree? Well, what about Bud Dupree, who went against Jonah Williams last week, the most vulnerable part of the Titans offensive line, and did essentially nothing? Bud Dupree is not a guy who I'm very high on, was never high on the move. He's garnish on the plate that makes the meal look better, he's not the meal. So, he's a force multiplier. You're right, but he's not the force. The force was Jeffrey Simmons. The force is Danico Autry. The force is Harold Landry. So with Harold Landry being out for the entire season with the ACL that happened before the year started, with Danico Autry not playing in this game, Bud Dupree doesn't do enough to help Jeffrey Simmons, and Jeffrey Simmons is on a bum ankle. So the Titans' weakness is incredibly exploitable based on Philly's personnel. The Titans' biggest strength on defense is weakened. And the Eagles have a fantastic offensive line that would have been tough to pass rush against anyway, even if healthy. So I think the Titans' defense has to win them games because the Titans' offense, we know, cannot keep up with Philly's offense. They simply don't have the coaching or the personnel to do so. So the Titans' defense has to win them this game with a couple of turnovers and big plays. And just with the state of the Titans' defensive line and then the realities of Philly's personnel, I cannot in any way pick the Titans to win this game. I think Philadelphia wins this game 31-16. I think the Titans score one touchdown, get a couple of field goals on the board, but they just can't keep pace with Philly because Philly's just a much more talented roster and has much better coaching on the offensive side of the ball than the Titans could ever dream of unless Arthur Smith came back. So just too many disadvantages for the Titans. I think it's close in the first half, but Philly extends that lead in the third quarter, 31-17 Philly.
Last week, I was pretty spot on in my prediction of that Green Bay game, saying that if the Eagles gave them good field position and a Hall of Fame quarterback turns it on, they can stay in that game. And that's exactly what happened. So I'll be the devil's advocate to what you were saying there. If Tennessee can control time of possession, they don't turn the ball over, and they happen to get a turnover from the Eagles offense, that's what's going to be interesting. Because if this game ends with Tennessee, let's say 35, 37 minutes to the Eagles, 25 or 23 minutes on offense, that could seriously change the tides. And we saw what Washington was able to do, just pounding the rock with Brian Robinson and Antonio Gibson, picking up key third down situations. Well, that was 3 weeks ago. And the Eagles have adapted in the last 2 weeks. They've been good situationally. They've been able to get off of the field. They've been able to win those one-on-one matchups. Darius Slay and James Bradbury are just playing at an exceptionally high level. Your concern is Derrick Henry. If Jonathan Gannon continues to be hard-headed and play that off zone, like you said, play that too high look, they will be susceptible to the play action game when they bring guys down into the box to cover Derrick Henry. The middle of the field will be open against them. But if the Eagles win their one-on-one matchups, they control the line of scrimmage, they dominate time of possession, which they have been shown to do with how good their offensive line is, and they pick up key third downs, they pick up third and shorts, they pick up fourth and shorts. Jalen Hurts controls the football, which he has done, and he plays at this MVP caliber level that we've seen in the last 5 quarters. Ty, no offense to you, I just think it's hard for any team to beat this Eagles team,
I agree.
Let alone Tennessee. I mean, until they prove me wrong, until they go on a stretch where back in 2017, towards the end of the year, we didn't really know what they were when Carson Wentz went out. I know their identity. I know that when they play a good football team, that they're going to be tough to have any team beat them, even the Buffaloes and the Kansas Cities of the world. Tennessee is another one of those tests that you have to say, we have to beat a team that's been in the playoffs. We have to beat a quarterback that's won big games. He's been in an AFC championship game. Derrick Henry is a proven all-pro caliber player. Jeffrey Simmons is a game wrecker. Like we said in the intro, can my horses beat your horses? That's been my thing all year long because I saw the Chip Kelly years where it was scheme over man-on-man matchups, how that didn't work. And what you were saying, yeah, they might get the chess pieces right, but if you have a board full of, let's say, 22 queen chess pieces to 22 pawns, sometimes the firepower is just they're gonna outfire the other team. And the way the Eagles offensive line has been playing, they can subdue what Bud Dupree, what Jeffrey Simmons can bring. And like you said, you went against Jonah Williams. Well, you're playing Lane Johnson and
Lane Johnson. Give me
Lane
a break,
Johnson
man.
Hasn't given up a sack since the Vietnam War.
It's like the Bengals on steroids, basically. Like the Titans couldn't beat the Bengals, and now they're playing a team that can do the exact same things better. Maybe Philly isn't as good on defense, but they have much better cornerbacks. The Titans were only able to survive because they got a few big plays. It's not going to happen against Philly's defense with the way they're built. So I'm on board with what you're saying about if the Titans win, it'll go this way. But I guess the real issue is I don't think the Titans will be able to run the ball. And if they can't, then that's just going to make it even easier for Philly to kind of take control.
And I really think that will be the reality, that whoever controls the line of scrimmage will end up winning this game. Well, the good thing is, regardless of the result, there's only one place that you turn to your shows. It's either Locked On Eagles or Locked On Titans. Thank you for making this crossover Thursday edition your first listen each and every day. And for your second listen, as Ty mentioned, make sure you check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast. From the games that matter to the biggest stories, go behind the scoreboard and get all the scenes from behind the on-field action from your local experts and insights only Locked On can provide. Locked On Sports Today is available on this app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. Tyler Rowland, thank you for joining us. Let us know where our fans can find you. I wish we could do this more than once every 4 years. Let's hope that with this edition of the 17th game, that rotationally we might be able to get this game every so often, but let our fans know where they can get you in the meantime.
Well, we know it'll be coming up soon. And hey, if a miracle happens and the Titans find a way, maybe we'll see you guys in February. Right now, Philly is my Super Bowl winner pick. I think Philly's winning the Super Bowl this year. So if the Titans could find a way to make it there and have a little rematch, sure, that would be fun. But I'm not going to hold my breath for that one. Either way, you can find me every day, Locked On Titans podcast, Locked On on the YouTube, on any podcast platform, at Tic Tac Titans on Twitter for all my film work and my incredible takes and all that. But it's been a pleasure to come on, and hopefully we get a good football game.
Yeah, that's ultimately what we want. You can check us out after the game on Sunday. This cross-conference matchup, we only see it once every 4 years. In the meantime, you could catch me at GC24_football on Twitter. Catch my co-host at DiBiase LOE. Check out the main page at Locked On Birds. Check out all the Locked On NFL podcasts. Check out any sport. We literally have everything that you can imagine over here at the Locked On Podcast Network. But until then, signing off for Tyler Rowland over at Locked On Titans, I'm Gino Cammilleri at Locked On Eagles.